Good morning. You're joining us at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Door County on August 7th, 2022. Thank you for being here.
Anna, you take care of the talkback technology piece too? Okay. Since we're not doing coffee break, how much time do you need?
Oh, like 2 minutes.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure that
As
I
long as
allow.
everything's working.
Yeah, I'll just double check with you before I bring the chimes. And, but I'll let everybody know that we'll take a few minutes after service for people to get organized, take care of the technology needs, and then we'll start this.
That sounds perfect.
No, an envelope. Oh, an envelope, okay, great.
And is there any place you would like me to be,
I
Mary
would
Ann?
like you to be right here next to me.
Oh,
Okay, is that okay with you?
That's okay.
Because you will go up there
Oh, I will.
and we'll just make it kind of seamless. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the order of service.
Well,
think
I
Sarah-
glanced at it, but I'll tell you that my absorption level is
Yeah.
very low given everything else. that's
Yeah,
going
I
on.
got it. I get it from your email. So I lead through all of this.
How are you doing today?
Okay.
Good, how about you?
After we have this moment of quiet, I'm going to introduce you there because you're going to be doing that reading. Do you have a printout of?
No, I just have it on my phone.
I did
would
make
love-
a
I
printout.
would
Would you
love a
prefer that?
printout.
Yeah.
So we're still down.
Just make some easier. I hate having lots of sheets of paper. Here we go. There's that for you. Okay, so I will introduce you before the reading. And then you will just stay there and start your message.
Oh, I will.
Okay, so it's seamless like that. Often the service leader does the reading. It's usually worked out between the service leader and the speaker. And in order to have it just not be awkward where you go up there and read, and then I introduce you, and then you go back up there, I'm going to introduce you before the reading. And I will say that you do your reading, and then you will deliver your message. And then when you're finished, you'll just come back to your
So
seat.
kind of give me like an inclination of like how long my message should be. No, the information has been really non-existent.
Okay, so usually, our speakers talk around 20 minutes, sometimes 30, so there's, this will go by fairly quickly, this upfront part. I just make a few brief words and looked at information about use of my open words or reading relevant to the cultural landscape. And then we do our Unison Affirmation. This takes a few minutes. People share some joys and concerns as well as some general announcements. That's a big role. There's a lot to share. 10 minutes.
My husband is a Quaker, so I understand.
The concept of
I got
what goes on
yes.
here. And then there will be a song during the offertory. Silence, quiet time. Looking at probably this could be as quick as 20 minutes. I do have a young gal here, our social justice scholarship. Just trying to announce since going to stand up. She's 18. She'll speak for a minute. Okay, so I don't envision her going on. And then we'll get to your introduction and then your reading and your message. So I would say it's between 20 and 30 minutes. You're in the front. Yeah, if you feel like you need to go longer,
Well,
just want each.
without having anything to refer to specifically, I'm happy to have it be a bit shorter.
That's
Ordinarily,
absolutely okay.
because ordinarily, I mean, I might be making a reference to a specific something as an example, but without the reference. So I'll have you mark.
Don't feel like you need to trying.
Okay.
Regularly.
Okay.
And that's, I mean, and it happens.
And then will they be invited to go over?
I will reference your exhibit, it's part of the introduction. And then Karen is also in the announcements is going to stand up. So, and then, kind of like as I thank you and remind everybody that we're going to be meeting back here on Tuesday. You know what to talk about it do. This is weird. So, I apologize on behalf of all of us here at home. So, after service, we normally do a 15-minute I'm just going to tell everybody that's great for the kids, the people that are organized, we're in a chime, and we will get back here for about a 15-minute.
That's a tough thing. Who is that behind the
I'm
desk?
Carol, I'm the other one when you're not here.
How are you this morning? Good.
But somebody answers those questions. I'll introduce you. I may pull up a question based on some remarks or
Ex-husband my ex-husband lives up here and I see most of this. We're together for Thanksgiving.
15
And will they have a chance to go look at the show for that, or? I don't know how long it's going to take.
Because I can say to me, we're not sure how an hour, but if we continue, we're going to give everybody about 15 minutes.
I think that would be good.
I will do it, that's a great idea.
Yeah. Because I did, yeah, I did have to be, probably Sunday. Poke their head in their business. So I think that would be great.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I know that there are some people who are coming to be able to see the show. If you're any members, are they welcome to come as well?
Yeah, and I will say in the upfront, if you're new here, we always invite people who have never been here before or have been away for a while to just get to introduce themselves and feel comfortable, and everybody's welcome to join. You're talking about right?
Excuse me, just for a minute, the recipient of our scholarship.
Oh, our scholarship gal is here?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be there in 1 minute. Thanks, Sally.
That's great. I'll go take my husband on what's going on.
Yeah. And his name is Dave.
David Graham.
David Graham, okay.
This is his medium. He's a photographer.
He's also a photographer. Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, I was just gonna sit in the corner there, but I can't. Okay, and I know, I've been into my 15 minutes of family member. Yeah. To get organized, check out her. And then back. Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So I thought I should have been impressed.
Okay, so you were.
Good morning.
How are you doing, Nick England? Well, you should be further away. Further away.
But anyway,
Because,
so if.
when I step out of the car, okay, good point. I know. So I'm gonna definitely.
Oh, you do?
Okay.
Took a bite.
Good mind and,
And everything to this side.
there's also about.
That's simple.
Nothing against you, Bonnie, but.
Good morning. Good morning. Yes, you were.
So, you haven't been with us.
I need,
Oh, you mean,
I need it for.
yes. Well, you said you're not.
Morning.
Friday. But this week, Friday, see, I didn't come Tuesday, but Friday was 8 point.
Yeah, I think on that one,
It was probably.
So you'll take care of the mic and all that?
Yeah, I'm doing that right now.
Dave, you need a program?
Right.
I gotta get going here. Stuff is happening.
You didn't sit anywhere.
Where'd they go Tuesday?
Good morning.
You got a program already. Yeah. Sure.
Good morning, Tom. How are you?
Anyway, well, Friday was a really good day.
System power design.
You guys are welcome to leave the rain.
Welcome back. Yes, ma'am. So I guess I'm. Okay, but, yeah, Ken was, well, I went to the airport with Ken, I sometimes keep my bike over there and then I can ride all day. Yeah, I know earlier today.
Okay, so put them together and put it back. Okay. Oh, that's great. You bet.
Carl.
Good morning, Carol. Good morning. Okay. That's
Mark?
So this.
Yeah.
I guess it's working. Good.
Well, I know Ken and I are gonna go to Green Bay.
Oh, yes, thank you so much. So hey, if you don't wanna switch out a different day, we can.
So we'll just show up and if anybody wants. Oh, well, that would be great if you come. Have you been upstairs before? Or were they in the same place?
I'm really appreciating it's fun.
I didn't like that.
You're a lucky woman.
Yeah. Well, Dave suggested that.
I'm enjoying watching myself, that's all.
Are you?
A little bit juvenile, but anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You find anybody else?
Yeah.
Did I see your son driving?
Well, you got other things.
I just saw you.
I'm showing you.
Yeah.
I still call
Yeah,
it.
well, it's the same time we've done it in previous years.
It's Warpinski. Is this okay?
Oh, okay.
Further back.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Did you come to the room? The windows down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Well, that makes sense.
I don't like it. when it's Yeah.
The tricky is. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
But yesterday when I was, it was 5 o'clock, but.
Hey, it's okay.
Most of us are. Good to see you. Sideways.
Thank you, Beth. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marianne O'Dowd, and I am your service leader today, and I will just give you a warning. This is my first time as service leader. I've practiced, but things happen. Welcome. And for those of you who are with us for a first time, I extend a very special welcome. And usually it's our custom to ask people who are new or new here in a long time to stand up and identify yourself if you feel comfortable doing so and tell us where you're from. And we'll pass the mic.
Oh, I'm Roxanne Hallock. I'm from Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I'm up here camping for a couple of weeks. I've always been interested in coming here, but I haven't had an opportunity because when I come up, usually I'm here for 3 days, so it doesn't work. So I'm very happy to be here.
Welcome.
Long time you.
I'm David Graham. I'm from De Pere, and I'm the right-hand man for your speaker today, helping to make sure that the prints go up and everything's level. I'm from originally Philadelphia, where I belonged to a Quaker meeting for years and years.
Anyone else? So normally we fortunately have been able to do coffee hour for the past few months, but Door County Public Health has raised our risk level to high. So we will be foregoing coffee hour today, but we'll still take about a 15-minute break before we gather for talkback. So hopefully everybody can see Terry's exhibit, which was just installed. And I think it'll be good to check that out after hearing what she has to say, and also before coming to talk back. At this point, we typically do announcements, and if anybody has anything to share.
Hi, Karen Winzenz here. On this gloomy day, the bright light is our new exhibition in the gallery. The artist, Terry Warpinski, is also giving the talk today. Terry is my former student and my very first gallery assistant at UW Green Bay. We go back a long ways. Actually, she told me that she took, how old were you, 12? 13, when she took a course during Operation Area Arts in Green Bay, but I don't remember her. She remembers me.
Anyone else?
Yeah, just a reminder that we're in the last quarter of our 25th anniversary community support initiative year, and it's the Housing Partnership of Door County. I don't remember the number, maybe you do, but I think I was told that the first month, July, of course we have third Sunday in July, but you can go ahead and donate anytime, just designate, 25th anniversary or housing partnership. But I think we're north of $1,500 through the first month of July, which thus far, as you know, all three of the quarters thus far have seen us go to $7,500 to each of the three recipients, and we certainly hope to make that a fourth $7,500 gift as well. So thank you for that, just a reminder.
And I would like to just piggyback on that because I was going to make a similar announcement, and that the Housing Partnership, they're doing some very innovative work, and I think a real important thing to stress is that they are providing housing for the workforce that really drives our economy. Those are the backbone workers in our community: teachers, nursing assistants, police, people who do work that really kind of drives our economy forward and are essential to keeping our community active and functional. And their model, using the housing trust, land trust model, is really innovative, it's proven, and it's sustainable. So any of the homes they develop will remain affordable in perpetuity. So people are not going to come in, get an affordable house, and then a few years down the line, sell it for a whopping profit to somebody who's going to turn it into an Airbnb. That's just not going to happen. So I just want to stress the significance of their approach to housing.
Spot on. And I think there was an article in the Pulse last week on the Housing Partnership as well, and you can always touch base with Mary Ann, knows a lot about it. Jim Honig, pastor over at Shepherd of the Bay, knows a lot about it. He's president, in fact. So there are a lot of resources that you can avail yourselves of to learn more about the Housing Partnership.
Any other announcements? All right, well, I have one. Joining us today is Ellie Crone. And Ellie was selected to receive UUFDC's 2022 Social Justice Scholarship. The $1,000 scholarship is awarded annually to a graduating senior, and it hopes to encourage local students to persevere for social justice wherever and whenever they find it. And Ellie stood out from among a pretty robust field of applicants this year for her commitment to justice and the fair treatment of people with physical and mental health challenges. She's going to be attending UW-Madison probably in a few days. And Ellie, please stand. And can we give her the mic? And I think she wants to make a few comments.
First, I'd just like to say thank you so much for honoring me with the scholarship. It was actually my guidance counselor who really encouraged me to do it this year, and I'm like, let's give it a shot. I am indeed attending University of Wisconsin-Madison in a few weeks now. 28th is the countdown date. I'm going to be majoring in biology, but what really drew me to the social justice scholarship is I really like social justice as a whole. For years, I've been attending events and volunteering at events for suicide prevention. Mental health is really a big passion of mine to help others who are struggling with it. And then recently, I also had a family member who was struggling with their physical health as well. So with those two combined, really just helping others really proved my passion, and it's going to lead me to the medical field one day. So I'm very excited for all of that. And thank you once again. It's lovely to be here. You all seem very nice.
Thanks. So anybody else? All right, I will light our chalice. Those of us who live in and love this beautiful place known as Door County, we probably have an above average awareness of the intimate relationship between people and their natural environment. This symbiosis is often called cultural landscapes. And later in the service, you're going to hear from Terry Warpinski, whose work the New York Times once described as especially attuned to the often subtle evidence of human impact on nature. I quote an article I found on the subject of culture and landscapes. Since landscape is all around us, it is related to, but not identical to the environment. Landscape is defined by our vision and interpreted by our minds. Thus, we are never in it. It lies before our eyes, and it becomes real only when we become conscious of it. Thus, it is evident that environment sustains us as creatures, while landscape displays us as cultures. Please stand for our Unison Affirmation and the humming of our doxology. We gather to seek knowledge and wisdom, to walk freely, vast reaches of mind and spirit, to celebrate within a caring community those truths, ancient and modern, which give meaning and direction to our lives. Now is the time in our service when we briefly share any joys that fill our heart or concerns that might be weighing on us. Does anybody have anything to share?
Hi, I'm Valerie, and as some of you know, I've been on the list for a liver transplant for about 3 years now. I was called in this week at midnight, went down to Milwaukee, did all the tests, tubes and tubes of blood were taken, and my head transplant doctor went to get the liver. And it's up to him. He goes there, he looks at the liver. If it is okay, he takes it and he comes back. Well, he didn't like the looks of it. He came back and he said, do you want to stay here or do you want to go home? And I said, let's get out of here and get some sleep. But the good news of this, all those tests they took, I found out I'm not pregnant.
Anyone else?
Good morning, I'm Beth, and I just learned last night from a good friend of mine in Ohio, Columbus, that a mutual college friend is, as we speak, in the process of passing over. And so I've been thinking a lot about Nancy this morning. She was a pianist, a musician, someone very dear to me. And so it's one of those mixes. It's a concern, but she's been living with Alzheimer's for a while. So in many ways it's a joy because she will be out of her current status and just find a little more ease.
No one else? Okay. So now we'll have this morning's offering, and this is when we support the work of UUFDC and the work we're trying to do out in the community. I now ask that we take a moment of silence to reflect on anything that might be weighing on you, anything you wish to contemplate or bring some attention to. Our speaker today is educator, photographer, and northeastern Wisconsin native Terry Warpinski. And we learned about her long connection to one of our members, Karen, a few moments ago. Terry taught photography for 32 years at the University of Oregon, and she now runs New Art Space, a gallery and studio in De Pere with her husband, David, who we just met. Her projects all share a concern for place. They dwell on and examine issues related to the intersection of landscape and culture and the impact of such on the environment. You might recognize her name locally as the photographer who captured many of Door County Land Trust sites, or as the judge of this year's wall-to-wall exhibit at the Hardy Gallery. And lucky for us, we can see her work right here in our gallery. Surface Tensions, the 3 landscapes of division, is now showing here through October 3rd. And the exhibition of photographs were taken between 2009 and 2015 and explore 3 contested borders. Please welcome Terry.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Well, first of all, I want to
read the reading that I'm supposed to read, as my mind is already leaping forward. When asked to select something to share with you, I fell back on a piece that was really instrumental to me, especially as I was living and working along the US-Mexican border. It was written in 1976 by Wisława Szymborska, the poet laureate of Poland, and this was deep in the middle of the Cold War. Oh, the leaky boundaries of man-made states. How many clouds float past them with impunity? How much desert sand shifts from one land to another? How many mountain pebbles tumble onto foreign soil in provocative hops? Need I mention every single bird that flies in the face of frontiers or alights on the roadblock of a border? A humble robin, still, its tail resides abroad while its beak stays at home. If that weren't enough, it won't stop bobbing. Among innumerable insects, I'll single out only the ant. Between the border guard's left and right boots, blithely ignoring the questions, where from and where to? Oh, to register in detail, at a glance, the chaos prevailing on every continent. Isn't that a privet on the far bank smuggling its 100,000th leaf across the river? And who but the octopus with impudent long arms would disrupt the sacred bounds of territorial waters? And how can we talk of order overall when the very placement of the stars leaves us doubting just what shines for whom? Not to speak of the fog's reprehensible drifting and the dust blowing over the steps as if they hadn't been already partitioned, and the voices coasting on obliging airwaves, that conspiratorial squeaking, those indecipherable mutters. Only what is human can truly be foreign. The rest is mixed vegetation, subversive moles, and wind. I'm going to get a quick drink of water. All right, so now to where my mind was leaping a few moments ago. I first want to express my gratitude to UUF and to the gallery committee and to Karen for allowing me to share my work with you on your walls. We had hatched plans a couple of years ago for this to happen. And of course, other things got in the way. But I'm grateful now that you are sharing your space again, that I'm able to engage with you. I think all artists understand that making art is an act of faith. First of all, faith in ourselves that we have something worth saying, something that it matters to communicate, and an act of faith that there will be an audience that will engage with the work. So I'm always deeply grateful when those things come together and celebrate that moment, and I'm grateful to you. There are so many places I could start. When talking about work, it's often helpful to try and describe like where it came from. What made this happen? What was the spark that started it? And with the work that I'm showing you on the walls, I'll first of all preface it by saying that in terms of its style, in terms of its use of the medium, it is different than anything I had done in the 30 years previously in my artistic career. Karen was my teacher as I was working in printmaking and painting and fibers, and I cared nothing about photography. I didn't get interested into photography until I was at the edge of graduating as an undergraduate, and then went on to graduate school and had it as my career, but my work always engaged a wide variety of media. And when I first became interested in the problem that surface tension takes a look at,
I was approaching it in a much more aesthetically layered way, in a way that maybe beautified the condition too much. And so it compelled me to work in a way that was deeply uncomfortable, working in color rather than in black and white, working in straight photography rather than having my hand lend other elements to it. And that I did that with a fair amount of terror of failure, and just that constant dis-ease of really not having a lot of confidence in it. And I'm grateful that work forced me, compelled me, demanded me to step out of my comfort zone. So I would like to share that about it. So I will say this work goes back to combinations of things like spending, oddly enough, a sabbatical in Australia, working amongst the Aborigines in their sacred sites where we're there for 30,000 plus years. Rock art pieces have been maintained as a central part of their spiritual landscape. They helped me understand a relationship with land that was deeply different than the way we in Western culture adhere to it. And one of the most important books that I read, which was really helpful to understand so much of what I was learning, was Bruce Chatwin's Songline. So if you've encountered that book or haven't, it's one that has been really important to me to understand the way in which we are a part of the earth. And that I hadn't understood before that there is this kind of deep connection. I think the next time I give a talk about my work, I will be beginning it a bit differently. Over the past couple of years, I have noted in my professional organizations and almost every talk that I've gone to, that we are now acknowledging that we are living on land that historically, ancestrally is not ours. And that acknowledgement is deeply troubling, and I'm coming to terms with how it matters to me in my work, in my message. And so I would like us all to just consider that this place that we love, that enriches us in so many ways, that is so beautiful and special, was taken from others. And that is painful to absorb that. In the 90s, after coming back from Australia, that sense of connection to land got me to thinking about other spiritual relationships to place. And I began looking at the landscape and the environment as a spiritual geography rather than simply a scientific geography. That as people who inhabit place, our faith, our belief systems are shaped by the places in which we live. And that led me to be working with lots of historic and archaeological sites in the Southwest. I followed the trail of Padre Eusebio Aquino, who is the first sort of missionary from Spain who landed in Mexico, who was charged by their Pope to establish missions and to seek the coast of California. He introduced agriculture to the native population, built churches, and also built a dependency upon the religious system for the well-being of the people, which is also deeply troubling. But it had me thinking about the massive impact that Christianity had on South America and the Southwest of our country. From there, I began thinking about our global religions today and how they inhabit geography. And having been raised Catholic, I understood, deeply and well what locations globally were significant in the initiation of Christianity. And as we understand now, with all of the global issues going on, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity all inhabit the same spiritual geography. I'm just going to get myself one more.
So that led me to apply for a Fulbright Fellowship back in 1999, which I was awarded beyond my wildest imaginings to spend a year in the Middle East. That was to begin in the fall of 2000, right at the same time that the Second Intifada broke out in Israel. And it was a time where no one was traveling there, but the US State Department, who administers carefully with the US government, the Fulbright Foundation, the Global Fulbright Awards, they were deeply encouraging me to still go, saying that in these times more than ever, these kinds of global relationships and scholarly ways of kind of rising above conflict are important. Terrified, I went and found it to be an absolutely incredible, powerful, life-changing experience, not unlike that kind of awakening to connection to the land that I experienced when I was in Australia 10 years earlier. One of the predicaments of my experience was that the places that I most was wanting to work with visually, photographically, at that time were the very places that were at the center of the battle between the Palestinians and the Israelis at that particular time. And so I had an incredibly productive experience there. I met a lot of really amazing people. I understood that what we think are intractable differences at a meta level have nothing to do with the engagement of people at the interpersonal level. And that is a kind of insight that's difficult to understand when we are sitting in our Western world, listening to our CNN, to know that these things that seem that they are impossible are really absolutely, we are capable of navigating them on a one-to-one, I meet you, you meet me level, which was incredibly important for me to understand. While I was there, it was an interesting time globally. I was there not knowing if Bush or Gore was our president. Things seemed really crazy here. The battle for leadership in Israel was also equally fraught. And Netanyahu came into authority at that point in time and threatened to build a wall to separate and save the Jewish population from the terrors of having to deal with conflict with the various factions of the Palestinian Islamic culture. And I remember listening and watching his talks on the local television with my jaw dropping, just thinking, this has just got to be a lot of bluster. It cannot be real. And his statement was something as bold as, I don't care if the wall we build lasts for 5 minutes or for 50 years, it will show that we are securing ourselves against outside threats. So I finished up my year, made some work that was important to me, but not ultimately the work I believe I was meant to make. That began a little bit later. In 2009, I was on another sabbatical. I was making a big transition in my academic life. I had spent 12 years as the vice provost for the university, doing work way outside the field of art, and was looking forward to going back to teach for the remainder of my career there. And so I took a sabbatical to reintroduce myself to teaching in the safety of another institution, and was invited to come down to the University of New Mexico in Las Cruces, which feels like it's just inches from the US-Mexican border. It was an area really comfortable to me because I had spent so many years earlier, as I mentioned, following the trail of Padre Eusebio Aquino, all as he meandered between Chihuahua and Sonora and what we now know as New Mexico and Arizona and Southern California. So I was so happy to go back to this desert landscape that I loved so much. And I mentioned this was 2009, didn't I? Okay, so in 2009, I was going there to begin teaching for the January semester and sort of began transitioning in December. And we had our national elections in November when there was a big political shift from Bush to Obama. And the government that was going out of office decided to make a big push to secure as much border with structure as possible before the next administration took over. And that is when I landed in New Mexico. And of course, you know what I began thinking about? What Netanyahu had told the Israeli people 9 years before. And that was when I felt like I was called to this place for a reason right now. That there aren't that many people that were like sort of sitting and thinking about those two things and how they parallel. And when I felt I needed to begin making work that was not like anything I had ever done before. And that, and I didn't have the idea about making a comparison about the borders. I just felt like I needed to document what was going on along the US-Mexican border then. After working on that for about a year, I felt like I absolutely had to go to Israel since I knew that the wall there had been built. And because I had so many important connections there, people who could help me navigate the complexities of just moving between the West Bank and Israel, that I decided to also begin working there. And that's when two strains of the work began. I mentioned this was 2009, right? Okay, because in 2009, we celebrated the anniversary of the falling of the Berlin Wall, which happened in 1989. There was a big, big, big celebration in Berlin. Well, I just had to route my flight to Tel Aviv through Berlin. And I had not been there before. I really hadn't spent any time in what was Eastern Europe. Much of my travel experience in Europe had been in Western Europe. And I was fascinated by how two walls were going up and one wall was being celebrated for having come down. And that is how surface tension began, looking at Berlin as a prologue and as an epilogue to what I was seeing happening in real time in Israel and the US. So that's how that body of work began. And my ambition for it was large and I thought finite. So this takes me up to working on it, investing every moment that I had and every penny that I had to traveling to these three geographies as much as I could to sort of flesh out and give full view to what I was seeing happening from both sides of all of those places. And I was also beginning to show the work. I toured surface tension to 15 institutions over the course of a couple of years. The full exhibition contains 89 images overall. So what you are seeing is a selected version of that. And I began working on a book project and have what first began as a book dummy for what might have been a trade book that turned into a limited edition book was going to be the final summation of that. And I'll ask you to please take a look at it. I'm very excited by how it turned out in terms of my ideas of the way that the book reveals these three geographies. So one of the things that one notices when one is living with an Islamic culture is that all of the books open up the opposite way and the pages all turn in the opposite direction. Well, that just made it natural for me to think that this book had no back. All the issues were forefront. So it has two fronts. And it has a book that sits between them and facing in the opposite direction because historically, I think it does, is the piece of the work that is about Berlin. And so It has a structure that if you unfold, it looks like a W, which I think uncannily stands for a wall, but not really. That was just happenstance. So anyway, back to 2015. As our country politically, I thought was coming to a place where we were no longer going to be supporting our fortified borders and working to deal with the needs of people to immigrate to the United States going into the elections for 2016, I began to move away from that project and went on to something else, which I could talk about, but and that something else had to do with the real human consequences of these contested borders is the tragedy of loss of life. That if you look at global statistics, and I got very much into that, and the reason I really got into it was in my wanderings along the Mexican border, from the Mexican side. I mean, the lovely critic from the New York Times noted my ability to see the subtle evidence. Well, the overt evidence that I was encountering was amazing. There was overt evidence of humanitarian interventions, of people leaving water for those who were making the incredibly difficult migration across incredibly inhospitable land. There is the shedding of too much, the backpacks, the clothing, the things, that you begin parsing out what you need. There are the heartbreaking sheddings with, suitcases with little girls, first communion dresses and quinceañero, all this are just left behind in canals, and because it's impossible to sort of carry all of your dreams with you, along with dropped toys and other kinds of things. But the most profound experience I had was coming across human remains. And I was working on one of the reservations along the border. And an interesting thing about the reservations is that their domain does not adhere to our domain, meaning our borders are not their borders. And there are a number of populations, whether they are native indigenous peoples or even just what were small communities of extended family members that straddle borders, that they all became divided. And I was working with a member of the tribe to go off of the road where U.S. citizens are not welcome unless you are hosted by someone. And from there, hopped over the border boundary and was wandering around, kind of following the obvious paths that some immigrants had taken. And I had been noticing bleached cow bones in other places, and saw what I took to be a similar sort of event not too far away, but something looked different. And I kept walking towards it and photographing and looking around. And it was in an obvious kind of waiting spot, a vantage point where one could kind of look over to see if there were authorities policing the border or not. They gave cover and a very little bit of shade. And there I came across what was a relatively recently expired human. And the skin was drawn up taut, like we might look at a tambourine or a drum head. All of his hair was still there and splayed out in the land like a crucifixion. And I went and found the tribal elder that was with me. He came and did a blessing over the corpse, and I took GPS coordinates using my marvelous and intelligent cell phone, and then contacted the Mexican authorities in Arizona at the embassy to give them that information so that perhaps they could return the remains to be identified someplace. But that had me thinking about the loss of life. You see the numbers. We know that on average over 4,000 humans expire that we know of in making that border crossing, which means there are so many more that we don't. When you reel that number out globally, I mean, we read about the most tragic group events like the boats capsizing in the Mediterranean, And we watched all the Syrian refugees wandering, along skirmishing the border to get up to Germany. The numbers are terrible. I mean, I guess the pandemic has changed my sense of big numbers. But when between 12,000 and 25,000 people are dying because of these political power decisions, it absolutely breaks my heart. And so I wanted to find a way to talk about that. And that's what my next project that I was working on when the pandemic shut us down was all about. So I think I am going to wrap it up here. I would love to have you take a look at the work. I think that will help you understand more. I do have it segmented into the 3 geographies. I do have the artist's proof copy of Surface Tension. The book is there. It's not for you to flip through. You can look at it. I would love to have a moment at some point to come back and walk you through it. And I look forward to having a conversation with you afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Allow me to just make a brief closing remark, adapted from Reverend Linda Susan Ulrich's weekly message, Honk If You Love. Geese fly much further as a group than they ever could alone. When a goose has been injured, 2 or 3 others stay with it on the ground until it recuperates. And as the scan migrates, they honk to remind their fellow birds that they're nearby, ready to help, encouraging each other through the long hours of flight. If we have as much sense as geese, then our hearts must be moved by more than parochial interests. If we hope to foster a more compassionate world, we must practice caring for one another with joy and over long distances. If justice is to be realized, then our voices must speak loudly, even boisterously, of love. Let this remind us that those beyond our circles, our borders, our walls, are embraced by the same immeasurable love by which we are held. Help us demonstrate kindness in all we do, and grant that we may indeed have as much sense as geese. I'll extinguish the chalice. And please remain seated for our postlude.